harder. Now you're in the world of hybrids instead of just Zoom.
It's just a different opportunity. It's a good opportunity. Yes.
That's right, Juan.
All right, so just close that page, then we said, well,
Yes. Streaming, which is good. And you want to go into multiple.
all right. There's one PM attendees, I think everybody's promoting PMs. So I will call this meeting of the Bend MPO Advisory Committee to order on May 13th, 2023. And we will just do, well, in the room here, I'll let everybody walk through. So Brian, if you'd like to start.
Great. Brian Potwin, Community Options Executive Director.
Tyler Dickey, Bend MPO Manager.
Eric Lint, Strategy Program Manager of Cascades East Transit.
Barb Campbell, Bend MPO Chair.
Casey Berg with OSU Cascades.
Toby Moxley of Bend, the Transportation Mobility.
Andrea Napoli, Senior Planner with the MPO. And Robin Lewis, Transportation Mobility Department.
Oh, online, yes, please, as well. So if we can, online, we have Greg Bryant. And I guess if everybody online could do it, I can't see everybody. So if you could just introduce yourselves, that would be great.
Hi, Kim Curley, Commute Options.
Peter Russell, Deschutes County.
Cassie Lacey, City of Bend.
Dave Thompson, BPAC.
I'm gonna let them in the house, so leave her in here.
Okay.
Liza,
Community member.
Rick Williams, ODOT, home with COVID.
Oh.
Thank you.
Cameron Crowd, type right 2, your meeting recorder.
Is that
Greg.
Greg Bryant.
Greg Bryant.
Yeah, I was here. You already said to me. I'm sorry.
Right. All right, we have, I think everybody's walked through this slide many, many times. Just raise your hand for those folks who are online. If you'd like to speak, we will try and get to you we'll be monitoring and try and get to you as quickly as we can. You can live transcript the meeting. I believe there's a prompt on your screen that allows that to function. And this meeting is being recorded and streamed on YouTube. So with that, to just jump into this. I don't want to spend too much time doing introductory stuff here. I'm hoping today that we can jump right into presentations on various projects and programs that have been discussed. And with that, we can have either CET, you can jump in, or we can have C jump in and walk through project proposals. Do you have a preference?
I think we can go. Robin can get going, and then we go. Is that okay?
Yeah. Robin, you should be able to screen share.
Okay.
Thanks for having us. This is great. Second meeting of this subcommittee. We had a lively discussion last week on creating a carbon reduction strategy that supports reduction in transportation emissions. Our proposal is to create a collaborative strategy and deliver projects by a collective team that aligns with and delivers on adopted plans. It's kind of, we are all expertise within our, we've got our own budgets and we've got our own plans that are laid out. A lot of the stuff we do works together to create this integrated transportation system. We talked last time about that transportation network efficiency and traffic signals, coordination and timing and better detection. TDM projects, walk bike projects that would connect folks with transit, but also just to where they need to go. Land use and how the city is moving in that direction of complete neighborhoods to reduce trips and to serve trips in shorter lengths because services are close to home. And then transit, kind of tying everybody together. And then this collaborative effort, we're all expertise and we're small enough in Bend to have that knowledge of we all know each other and we're really easy to coordinate. And yet we're big enough that we've got a lot of expertise and depth within each agency. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Toby, and he's got a presentation on this approach, this collaborative approach that we're thinking about.
So basically, after talking about this internally and also talking with David Harris, our director, about this, we pretty much removed any City of Bend project that was more traditional infrastructure project from the list of projects that we reviewed last week. And we really want to focus on one project, which is the New Mobility Framework or New Mobility Initiative. And that one I'm going to share right now. And I'm going to go through, and I practiced, and I was at 5 minutes and 9 seconds because you gave everybody 5 minutes timer. But because we removed 5 projects, I think I have at least 7.
You can have longer.
Okay.
We're anticipating 5 minutes per project.
That's
so
what I hoped you would say.
Wondering how we're both thinking we're gonna have like 60 minutes or something in presentation, so.
Yeah, okay, so let's go through this.
Let's just be honest, we don't want to give more than 10.
So the vision behind this project is really to create a world-class mobility ecosystem for the city of Bend. And when I say the city of Bend, I mean the city as a whole, not the city of Bend, city as an organization. And we feel that we can have a great project for this grant that will reduce carbon emissions through a multi-agency collaboration. And by doing that by implementing a combination of technology, services that can initiate a long-term mode shift for transit, not just a short-term gain. The goal really behind the New Mobility Initiative, and if you give me another 45 minutes, we can talk about the entirety of that project. But for short, for the purpose of today, on a high level, the vision is really to initiate that mode shift, to reduce carbon emissions and overall increase the quality of life for people that live in Bend, based on what we're used to, on what we want to see in the future. That this group of people an organization joining together within the New Mobility Initiative would work to create a new mobility framework that would function as a baseline and a common vision that can be shared among all public agencies, cross-sector, and private entities to always work together, moving Bend forward as it relates to transportation and mobility. And that framework would find its foundation in existing plans that were developed. So we would align goals, objectives, strategies from existing plans like the Transportation System Plan, the Climate Action Plan, and the Transit Master Plan. This is really a more holistic approach because mode shift isn't easy and nobody can do it by themselves. And if we think that, we're just off on the wrong track. And so I think together we can aim a path forward through innovative and strategic partnerships that need to be rooted in multi-agency cross-sector collaboration and partnerships, industry alliances, and together we can shape this new approach moving forward. And this diagram shows this very well, right? This is based on the collective impact model, which was developed by Stanford, that is really rooted in a common vision, shared measurables, community involvement, and really working together for the common good and to advance that mission forward. And if you look at this diagram, that's kind of the structure that we're envisioning, where there's a backbone organization that keeps everything together. There's a steering committee that's composed out of leadership from all partners and organizations that strategically then develops work groups that tackle policy work that's needed, adjustments to frameworks, infrastructure. How should we build something so it actually makes sense right? We don't build something now that we know is already outdated in 10 years and doesn't benefit us anymore. That said, this is not a new plan. It's just a new approach. It's taking the best from the TSP, the best from the CT master plan, the best from the climate action plan, and align that into a framework that we measure every program and project moving forward on, so that we know that this project that we all agreed on doing, or this program, really touches on one of these plans. We're not doing bike share just to do bike share. We do bike share because it advances our TSP, it achieves a climate goal, and it helps somehow CT or the transit authority to achieve their goal. On this slide, you can see a couple objectives from these plans established that we feel would be a great foundation to work towards a framework that everybody can agree to, because everybody kind of also aligns with them. And when I say everybody, I mean every public agency. And I think that would be a great way to move forward.
So you want to talk questions?
I will, sure. That doesn't matter to me. I think we can do questions really quick. Greg?
Greg, yeah.
Okay, this is all good planning and everything else, but you're only talking about the city proper of Bend. I'm thinking this should be for Bend metropolitan area. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
So from here, not a plan. This is the model that we can see can actually work really well. So if you see this new mobility initiative, all these bubbles are all the different community partners, organizations, and we're talking about a carbon reduction program. And how do we do that, right? Well, we can do that by jointly all together support programs or initiatives and collaborate on something like the transit district formation, so that we can influence that the right way, that we make decisions that lead us forward, not backwards. We can make sure that whatever we work on in a transit district and a new public transit direction actually can benefit TDM programs now and in the future. That is something that we consider in our long-term approach, that if we develop new programs like Right Bend, that we look at them from the opportunity, what if Right Bend becomes a TDM option in 5 years when it's required by the state, right? Things like that. That we really work towards a mobility as a service program. And that's easy to say, but it's really hard to do without the services. So we need to build the services to get there. And that really leads us to something that we discussed in the first meeting for this grant, which is a integrated transit system or transit services that are all integrated in one app, in one platform, where we make it easy and convenient for people to get around. When we do that, we really lay the foundation for a mode shift that includes everything from transit to micromobility to sustainable mobility. And that together will have a direct impact on carbon emissions. The carbon reduction program, as it is defined right now, has 2 strategies or 2 objectives and priorities that this new mobility initiative will target. 1, are transportation options. 2, system operations. While it seems very high level, the new mobility initiative, through the framework and the collaboration that we can do, will hit those 2 priority areas for the grant application 100%. We would apply for the full amount of $1.1 or $1.08 million over 5 years. And that funding would be divided actually in about $600,000 for planning and structure, which would include funding for the OSU Cascade Mobility Lab, consulting service that we probably will need, marketing and outreach, community engagement, and the funding for backbone organization that can actually ensure that all the partners are doing what they're doing, are kept held accountable, and are moving together forward. And we will use about, which is almost half of the entire funding, $500,000 to do what the TSP says, to demonstrate, develop, and implement new programs that have a direct impact, positive impact on reducing carbon reductions, advance the TSP, and achieve climate action goals that we have set for the city or the metropolitan planning, the metro area. The city's mobility division within the Transportation Mobility Department has the local match for this program already budgeted for the next biennial budget. So that's something that we already have as a line item budgeted. I thought it was important to look at how this actually the program application works with the points awarded for 5 different categories and how this project would match. Climate benefits are awarded 60 points. And a simple calculation using the Department of Energy's emission calculator that everybody can find online, calculating for a restart of Right Bend this year that would go on for 5 years, putting in Bend Pool that can be covered or included in this program, and including the ridership that we have had so far for bike share, and then we hope to grow over the next 5 years, calculating a 5 to 8% increase in ridership year over year in the next 5 years. We estimate that through this collective impact approach, we could reduce VMTs by 831,000 miles traveled in 5 years. And that would have a direct impact on CO2 reductions by 398,000 or 398 metric tons. That's a solid carbon reduction that can be achieved. And we can look at that in numbers if we decide that this is where we're going for. The local support engagement gets 10 points for the application. The core principle of this entire initiative is community collaboration. So we feel we have that checked. Equity is another 10 points. We will, through this, not only in the 5th year, but in year 1, would strategically work together to ensure that we increase access to public transportation and all the services we already have into historically disadvantaged communities and socially disadvantaged people like that live in the city of Bend. So while we are expanding over here to generate revenue, we equally expand over here to provide the services that are desperately needed where they need it. And opportunities and innovation is another category with 10 points. We feel that just the idea of thinking about a collective approach to develop an integrated mobility as a service system is an innovative idea. And we are really excited about what new programming ideas we can come up with if we actually all think together instead of isolated by ourselves. And project readiness is another 10 points. And the city's TMD and the mobility division is pretty much ready to get going with this on day 1. That said, there's a real cost of inaction as a comprehensive method. And I think we all feel that, we all know that, but sometimes, quite frankly, I think we're all hesitant to admit it. And that is if we don't really start working together to build the system that we want, we will see a quality of life decrease. A recent study or survey that was done in Bend still had us really good in quality of life, but clearly lower than it was a few years ago. There will be a greater cost to build and maintain more. We already know that the infrastructure that we're building now is most likely outdated when we have it finished. And we need to maintain that. And eventually we need to be willing to say, how about we do this slightly different? And I think we all want to, it's just sometimes not easy to get there. We will have increased congestion because while we are doing what's necessary to improve our transportation system, the focus is still very heavy on cars. That's okay because 98% of travel in Bend is done by cars. But if we don't start to move the needle, we'll never change that. So let's change that. And we will contribute to more inequity. We will increase carbon emissions. And we will eventually be not able to meet our climate action goals or Vision Zero because as long as we maintain and build what got us here in the first place, how do we ever expect that we reach a better place? That's all I got. Thanks. Did you time me?
It's good.
I should stop sharing that.
Before we move on, does anybody either in the room here or online have questions of Toby of their proposal?
So the funding is going towards development of a plan that essentially, right, a plan that then is a program.
No plan. The plan's already in place. So the funding would go, the planning funding would go to actually create a strategic alliance between local players that agree on a framework that they want to, how they want to achieve existing plans and project that. And then
That would be documented.
yeah, that would be
So you could
documented.
call the framework plan.
You can call it a framework. Yeah.
It's a product.
Yes.
Something.
The reason I didn't want to use the word plan, quite frankly, is because I don't want us to think that we're trying to start from scratch to develop a new plan. I think it's really, really important to recognize that we have spent a lot of time, effort, and a lot of really good work to develop a transportation system plan and the CT master plan and the climate action plan, and that we need to honor that. So that's why I was hesitant using the word.
Okay, or product.
And
Product.
And I would add to that I think the framework is really about how do we get all the agencies together and who's contributing what to reach the goal, right? And then I think there's also this collective impact model says we have a united vision or whatever that term is, which when everyone's in the same room, we should define that vision. You know, I think Toby, with the initiative that we have so far, we don't have everyone in the same room with formal agreements as to how we're contributing and that collective vision clearly identified. So I agree, there's some planning to be done still.
Right,
Yeah.
so the product that comes out of it is like a community wellness, right? And then once that's done, is it then a program and then the city will be that program, like to actually implement?
Yep. So the backbone will oversee the programming moving forward, and the decisions there will be made together to say, okay, what are the overlining objectives, right, between the three different plans? Because if you actually start looking at them, there's a lot of the same goals in them. So if you align them, we're creating a programmatic framework under which we should move forward. If you're saying, just as an example, micromobility, right? Do we need e-scooters? Why do we need them? How do they fit in our framework? Do we just want them because we have a mobility manager who thinks they're really cool? Or do we want them because they really have a purpose in our framework? And what do we use them for? If we do that, we are more strategic about what we're doing. Or complete communities. What does it mean? How do we build them, right? Like if we have a development, should we look at our code together? Like what's a framework that actually gets us where we want to go to? And so that's why we wanted to build in some funding for programs that if we come up with an idea for, let's say, good car share, like it's done by Good to Go from Forest Mobility, would that be a great program for Bend? What does it mean? How do we do that in a context of so many different decentralized government agencies in the city, right? The city could do that. We can have 2 vehicles on city campus, great. But wouldn't it be better if we have the city of Bend, the Parks District, the county, the school district, and CET all agree on it, and suddenly we can have 10 vehicles strategically placed where they go. So now we need some seed money. So we wanted to build in some funding that we can say, now this money we could use for that to seed it. Then we can apply for additional grant funds. And we automatically always have a unified collective of public entities that are applying for these new programs, showing a lot of unity in our community, a lot of collaborative strategy in our community, which is always highly regarded, especially today, as community engagement, community feedback, involvement is so important.
All right, I think,
Cassie? Or was
yeah,
someone
go
first?
ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Toby. I guess I'm just kind of curious about like the overall governance of the initiative. So can you just clarify? I think I kind of got it from your slides, but just to make it really clear, like who is on kind of that core project team, like putting the framework together and deciding, yes, this is the framework. Is it like is it the people who you had logos of on that one slide? And then is it, my assumption is that then is the city intended to be kind of like the lead, like the person who would actually coordinate meetings and kind of like shepherd it forward?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there's really 2 elements to that. One, there will be a steering committee, which would be the governance for the entire initiative that should be composed out of stakeholders and representatives for every public and private entity that wants to join. That like when we are taking this forward, we would bring it to these organizations, present it, there would be some sort of an agreement, either in form of an IGA or MOU between the organizations. So the organizations know what they're committing to. It's not just another committee, hey, great, we meet every 5 months and we sit together. It's very action driven. And then there's a backbone that really puts all the backbone support behind it, meaning that backbone organization we all felt it hasn't been decided, but we all felt that would be best done by the city as being the entity to bring everybody together, where we would provide staffing resources, meeting resources to really say, we are holding this all here together. We schedule the meetings, we keep everybody accountable, we're following up, we're doing the communication, we're organizing the community outreach. Because a big component then on the third lab is the public will. Sorry.
Okay, that's helpful. And I think, yeah, kind of that piece about having like IGAs or something is also helpful to know. Like it would be more formalized than just kind of like, hey, let's get this group together every month. And yeah, that sounds
Very
good.
formalized.
All right, Greg?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. My other question is the fact that there are other cities that are doing this, I'm assuming. Is that right, Tobias? Do you hear me?
We have not found any cities that have embraced this model to tackle mobility as like, or transportation mobility on this level. Collective impact has been embraced as a project, like for a lot of like other social issues, like houselessness, education, but we haven't seen it done yet on that level, including all public entities on a for transportation.
Okay. Okay.
Peter? Peter?
He's muted. Peter, you're muted.
Okay, how about now?
There you go.
There you go.
I feel like you better mute it, Peter.
No, so anyways, what I've got here, yeah, I'm hitting buttons left and right. So anyways, what I've got is, I don't think it scores very well into the climate benefits project selection criteria. You look at number 1A and 1B, and they're basically about immediate direct applications and longer term. And we don't need to reinvent the Bend MPO TAC and the Bend MPO policy board. Just my opinion.
Do I understand that the plans that are already in place also include the Parks District Master Plan? And so from that perspective, it is different than the MPO board or the MPO TAC.
Yep.
But I do have concern. It just seems like so much coordinating, trying to find what bits of all of these different plans are shared and having to do with this initiative.
Yep.
You know, that makes me very nervous, Toby. That just, that just seems like that's all the money right there is, just trying to figure out where does our transportation system plan overlap with the parks plan and the school plan,
Yeah, it's a really good comment. And during the work group meetings that we actually have had from New Mobility over the last 12 months, that has representatives of every group, including the parks. That was one of the things that we all kind of like yearn for and long for. They were like, we all feel we're working so isolated.
Yeah.
It's like we can't get anything done because one hand doesn't know what the other one does. Like if you just look like over the last couple of months, 3 entities did 3 parking studies and spent thousands of dollars on them. And why? If we can actually talk together and figure this out together. And I think we often think we can because we're decentralized, but I think there's no need for that. And where I agree with Peter, I think I actually completely disagree with the statement that it wouldn't have a carbon footprint. I think you're just measuring it wrong. And maybe you didn't hear the part that 398,000 metric ton reduction in carbon emissions is really, maybe Cassie can jump in, but I don't think that's a low number. I just think that's a number that we have not heard of. But we can actually achieve that. And there's nothing in this program that says it needs to be achieved immediately tomorrow. And I think the other thing is, there is, granted, a couple other projects that we can do that will have a small impact in carbon emission tomorrow. But it's an illusion to think that that is a long-term impact. Because anything we're doing yes, like we discussed last meeting, traffic signal improvement will have an immediate impact on carbon emissions today. But they will also encourage more travel and more traffic, because the more convenience traffic is, the higher it gets. And we know that from the highway example, we can add another lane that will improve traffic flow, but it also increase traffic in the long run. So I think we're really, if we're not starting to find a way to look at this in a long-term vision, even if it might be difficult, challenging, nervous at a time, all we're doing is just taking a Lego block from here and we're moving it back here. And the only difference is that the Lego block that we're moving down the road is not one 4-pack Duplo block. It's actually 3 of them stuck there. And that's not me making that up. We all know that's fact. So I think I'm not saying that we have the application and the pitch developed yet. I think there's a lot we will do on our end internally with the city to make sure that before we would apply, we would get all the commitments, all the agreements from all partners. And I would hope the county would be on board on that too. Even though I didn't measure them, mention them, the same with the city and with the school board. I think we have done great work with the school district in the past, and I think we need to build on that. But I think the truth is, with everything, there's no dictatorship. You can only move forward if collectively to really achieve something for the greater good. And I think it would be a great experiment to do that. Costly one too, I admit that. But what if it works?
I just have one question for you in terms of like being scalable. If say if this project is awarded funding, but it's not awarded the whole 1.1, do you have, I assume you have the ability to scale it?
Absolutely.
And I had a just policy question, knowing that these typically have audits afterwards and require discrete products. Would a project of this type be eligible? Given that we don't have the concrete, discrete product at the end of it.
We could have a
We
concrete
could have a
discrete
concrete
product at the end,
Yeah.
which would be initiating a new program that's funded through this. If we saw that funding split, the idea would be, I mean, I think somewhere around 60-40, 50-50, however, but the goal being as little planning as necessary to make sure everyone's on the same page and in agreement, but then utilizing additional funds. And that's where I think you're getting the carbon reduction numbers from, is implementing a program
Correct.
that's actually driving real change, not just sitting around taking a plan.
And a good product would be supporting the effort to a transit district. There's a real opportunity to start like this, and that the governance that's set up for here could become a transit district under circumstances. That one would be one way to support it. Another thing I think where a benefit for the city lies is that as the city is becoming or is planning to be certified to receive federal funds, this would be an ideal demonstration project that would be needed to be observed by like our analysts to actually get us there.
Cassie?
I hope I'm going to be able to word this correctly. I think, Toby, just based on what you and I have talked about this initiative before, is it correct to think of it as like, because I feel like I'm hearing some comments and I understand like it's not always the most exciting to feel like when you think about anything that requires more planning, that feels less exciting and impactful than like a project. But when I've kind of thought about this, it seems to me like the outcome of this is that we do move forward on a number of projects that we need to work collectively on. So what we have right now is like a set of plans, but there's a lot of actions in those plans that are not moving forward because they require a level of coordination that we're not doing currently. And therefore the barrier, we're not going to move those forward until we like organize ourselves in a way that allows us to move them forward. And that is kind of what this initiative allows us to do. So there's like a planning, there is always a planning level of it, because it's like, that's the part where we're coordinating amongst ourselves, but then it kind of is meant to quickly lead towards actually implementing some of those projects that we feel like we're unable to implement when we're kind of working in our silos right now. Is that the right way of thinking about it?
That's the right way of thinking about it. I think if I would put a timeline on it, I think the planning stage for it is somewhere between 3 and 9 months. That's it. And then it's like all action. Because then it's really about like how do we implement that? It needs to be action driven so that the public will can be there to actually support initiatives like this, right? And that we can work on funding mechanisms to get the programs that we need that advance those trends.
And I think it might be helpful to kind of identify, like in the proposal or kind of like as the pitch was refined, identify, you've kind of done it, you've shared some examples just through your comments, but kind of like having a list of like, these are some of the projects we know we'd be able to advance if we're working together in this kind of collective action group. I think that would be helpful to bring it home and also make it more clear, like, what is the carbon impact going to be? Like if one of those is some sort of bike share program, it's easier for people to see like, okay, an outcome of this would be a bike share that we all share, and then we can see the climate impact of that.
Okay, that's good feedback.
Even if that's like a hypothetical list, because it may change when we actually get together.
Okay, I think with that, then I'd like to turn it over to Eric. And you obviously have a little more time than we originally allocated, so if you'd like to jump in and share your slides.
It's good. Share my screen. Okay, so we're looking at a bus stop improvement program. This is pretty much acquiring shelters and rehabilitating old bus stops across the city of Bend and DRW and the MPO area. Oops. So background, look, it shows the pictures. Most ET bus stops have very old shelters. Most of them were hand-me-downs from different agencies, whether it's our predecessor agency. Salem gave us a bunch from Chariots, and it's the hip roof type there. They're 10, 15 years old at best. A lot of them have the glass broken out, and we're looking to avoid those kind of maintenance issues in the future. Now, of course, this is something that helps meet ADA standards. City of Bend, as most will recall, had a major settlement and carried out a lot of big upgrades in 2009 and following. The type of shelters we're looking at will have all suggested ADA features, including benches, clear space, and signage, and so on. We have nearly 40 bus stops within Bend that feature a shelter, and half of those are damaged. So
is that just been basically through vandalism primarily?
Vandalism, accidents, and almost all of them have, the ones that are damaged have the glass panels broken out, at least one. Like that one across from Costco has one panel remaining. There's one down the street here by Troy Field that has, I think, 2 panels remaining. So this is something that we're working on. I talked to our vendor earlier today, and we're going to be going ahead with this, but MPO funds will help us get where we really want to be. So benefits, it improves the rider experience. Riders have shown demand. And this picture was on the front page of the bulletin last year. So I coined a new phrase, demand chairs. I think most people here are just familiar with the desire paths. But we saw people putting out kitchen chairs and benches and cinder blocks. And, because we maintained the right of way, we had to remove those, which I don't like personally. I want people to be comfortable at these stops. They're showing demand for that. So we want to get furniture out there to make this a comfortable experience. Now, the big benefit is that these are shovel ready for pretty much every dollar that can meet the target. We can put another bus stop out there. And these things will be delivered in weeks, not months. And we can just get them out there anytime. So options, we're looking at these modern style shelters. They're modular, resilient to damage. They come in 4-foot panels like that. So a lot of these small shelters that we have out currently, like at Walmart or in front of Taco Bell, those are 8-foot wide shelters. The ones pictured, these are 16-foot wide. We'd be looking at pretty much 8-foot to 12-foot at most locations. Larger pads or higher priority zones may get the 16-footers. We're going to put 16-footers at Hawthorne Station as part of our rebuild this year. Upgrades can be phased in as funds or technology improves. We haven't budgeted this specifically yet, but we have real-time signage. It's going to be our next pursuit, and solar powered lighting. New bus stops that are being built to come forward will have conduit serving the bus stop footprint. So we should have, that capacity to have real-time signage and lighting plugged in, but we're also looking at solar options too, because it's just nice to have. The cost for an 8-foot shelter is $12,000. That's inclusive of the bench, signage, and everything that makes it a complete shelter. $19,000 is the 16-foot shelter price. If we need to install them, now these style are heavier, they're bigger than the old shelters. The old shelters were just aluminum sheds pretty much that you can tack in with 2-inch screws. These ones take 6-inch screws and they're bolts. So they take a little more to install. We can probably get under the $3,000 price for installing each, but just to be safe, I'm budgeting $3,000 to $10,000 each. $10,000 is if we have to rebuild the whole doggone bus stop and build it to spec. But we should be able to get in on the lower end there for installs. But let's say $25 or $25,000 per stop, and our goal would be at least 25 new in the next phase. And this is just a handful of some of the more high priority locations. This is, I think, 22 stops, primarily along 3rd Street and on the east side of town. And I tried color coding these by site readiness. Red ones would need to be completely rebuilt. The yellow ones may be a little too small, but we can look at rehabbing them without complete rebuild. And green ones, we should be able to just get up and go and get those installed. Now, again, these are just the higher priority ones. There's ones like at COCC. We've got some on the west side as well that we're looking at. So shovel ready, pretty much any bus stop can be converted as soon as we're ready. That's it. I didn't really address the climate impact scores, but the idea here is that this enhances transit ridership, that improves the experience, and serves populations that aren't just trying to get to the mountain or ride the river, but get to where they need to be for work or medical needs or whatever the case may be. This is something we've received a lot of comments about, complaints about, and suggestions. We want to do this the right way, and it's important to make this a good experience for our clients.
Yeah. I think it's a great project. I also think it's a perfect use case to make for our project proposal, because to achieve some of the new shelters, there's some updates needed to the city's design specs to currently rebuild at the city 4-inch concrete platforms for these shelters. To enable you to build the new ones, they need to be 6-inch deep or 8-inch deep, and they need to be larger. So I think that's actually, you also said it enhances use like adoption of transit, which makes it that perfect use case project to make it part of the new mobility initiative, to say, as part of that, a great example is we're adjusting our policy to enable our transit authority to build shelters like XYZ in the future. And even we might only be able to achieve 10 per year or whatever it is, we actually start working together. So I'm actually thankful for that presentation like that, because that's exactly what we needed. So I think that's kind of like explains what we wanted to do. I think I'm all for that if that's what we decide.
Yeah, and just to add on, we're building out a coherent capital plan, which seems we haven't had before. But we are building out a capital plan so that we can have that rollout every year, add new stops, make upgrades, make maintenance fixes as needed. So that will be baked into our plan. Greg, I see a hand.
Yeah, see now, are we going to be presenting this to the policy after this is over with here or what? Because my question is the fact that we asked everybody to do the points on these as they came up, and so we need points on this one. Okay.
I think, yeah, what we're intending, just a reminder to everybody, is that the MPO area is guaranteed to receive about 1.1 million, but the process for the application process and the selection process is going to be run by ODOT's climate office in Salem. And so I believe what ODOT is going to be seeking from the MPO is a letter of endorsement of priorities for the Bend area. And then they will consider that as part of the review process as they form a budget committee and stuff in that process. Anybody have any questions for Eric? Any additional questions?
Eric, have you found any data that supports better transit shelters, increased ridership, or is there a correlation in the data that then you can say is going to lead to that carbon reduction?
Not precisely. Just looking at the usage for each location.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty common within even TDM as an industry that it's hard to tie a improvement in convenience or something to more ridership, which is always challenging.
But I think, I would say too, I think that in the picture of the photo of the stop with two chairs sitting out there, is that the lack of shelters is really a deterrent, particularly for choice riders.
Absolutely.
It's not a pleasant or necessarily dignified experience, waiting in that situation. And so it's hard to quantify what that means, but I think there's a real impact of not having quality waiting space.
Exactly. And part of it too is that this is a pathway kind of towards the more complete bus stop where we'll have the information screens that have real-time signage, and that helps have informed rides. That makes it easier to be a choice rider because it's going to be here in 15 minutes rather than having anxiety about how the system works. So it's going to be a pathway to that complete stop. And as we talk about complete communities and so on, same concept for us.
Send you a quick, I was just actually searching that just to see if there's any data out there. A comparison of perceived and real wait time at transit stops with benches and shelters found that as wait time increases, stops with basic shelters can kind of improve that perception of I had to wait an extra 5 minutes, but as long as I have a good shelter, I'm willing to do it. So in Bend with our headways and stuff, that's probably the indication. But
Greg, do you have a question?
Yeah, I've got another question. I was going to do with lights. Is there going to be a light out there, like a solar light, so that they can, at nighttime at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock when it gets dark?
Yep, that's the plan. Is to include lights.
Okay.
They're actually built into the roof.
Your cool shelters.
We do have those styles.
do you want us to go also, or is you plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. Would you like to go now?
If you, I don't know what
Yeah.
this agenda is, but
Yes, actually, go go for it.
Okay, great. All right, so commute options is mentioned a couple of times as far as potential projects, and it's focusing on the expansion and enhancement of the Get There program. And so Kim is going to talk a little bit about that in just a second, but we feel like there's some pretty compelling reasons to use part of this funding for that. There's the climate friendlies and equitable communities and eco rule that are coming up to the Bend MPO employers by 2025. So the state's going to be mandating that large employers in certain neighborhoods in the Bend MPO will need to offer trip reduction opportunities. Commute options is in a particularly unique position as far as being a qualified partner with this, as far as providing Get There. It's an established program that's successful within the city of Bend and the Bend MPO. We have a good reputation with the folks that we do work with this on, and Kim can talk about some of the numbers and the data, but as far as really being shovel ready, it's ready to go right now. Also, we can really track the generated CO2 savings from this too, so we can see exactly the benefits of using this and expanding it. But I'll turn it over to Kim to talk a little bit more about what it is, because I feel like the last meeting we had, some folks in the room didn't quite understand exactly what Get There is and how it fits into this framework. So I'll let Kim take it over from here.
Thanks. Hi, Kim Curley, Community Engagement Coordinator for Commute Options. We are one of the regional network administrators in Oregon for a website platform and campaign called Get There Connect. And I'm going to share my screen and just very quickly overview this for you. Can you see?
Yep.
Somebody say yes. Okay. So this is my dashboard. These are my personal trips and my information. So a user can see their calendar here and then log a remote work trip, which is what I'm doing today. So I'm going to log that trip, and then you can see over here the statistic button just went up, which is really neat. We use this system to give rewards to our participating companies. They pay dues to Commute Options based on the number of people who did what I just did right there, log a trip. And so I've got 58 points in my reward kitty right now, and I can go and get my $20 gift card. Thank you, Brian, for funding that. And then Get There keeps stats like this, which is since 2019, and I've been logging 1,403 trips. Here's my number of carbon reduction and burned calories. I obviously telework more than I ride a bike. So there you go. And then at a different level, this is our Deschutes County network. Peter, I picked this for you. There are 255 active users in the Deschutes County Employees Network. You can see that in the last 30 days, they've logged almost 15,000 miles reduced, and grams saved, calories burned, etc. You can also do year to date, and real quickly those numbers go way up. And then if we did all of last year, holy moly, 17,000 trips were logged. And then you get just this very granular amount of data. So I wanted to explain that ODOT does fund this product across the state. Our usership in the Commute Options service area is very high because we do give that individual something to give us their data, which is a nice relationship. And the support for this technology is already here. The marketing tools, all of that support comes from ODOT and is not local funding that's going into it. So looking at ways to capture trips reduced, single occupant vehicle trips that don't get taken is already happening. We have many, many large and small employers in the city of Bend and also in the rest of our 17 county service area. So the community engagement piece and the local support is already in place. And to enhance and augment the knowledge of Get There, the
the use of rewards, perhaps by giving some kind of subsidy or incentive to employers to add new employees to their networks or to start up with commute options. We just signed up Hum Kombucha, and we've got about 45 people there who are logging trips in just the last couple weeks. So wanted to just give you a quick overview of that. And a lot of people in the room and on the Zoom already participate. So I know Casey Berg uses Get There for his own internal rewards program. Miss Robin Lewis is my employee transportation coordinator at the city of Bend, who also offers their own rewards. And then of course, Commute Options is kind of the catch-all for people who don't really have admin to run their own incentive program. It's all right here through us. So with that, I will stop talking and see if anybody has a comment.
Yeah, and to add to that as well, we really felt like this would be a good companion to what the city is planning in combination with that, as we're providing more services and then connecting more people to these services. Get There allows folks to not only track and do all this great stuff, but it also allows for ride matching. So more folks that are in it, the better this program, this platform actually is. And then as far as sustainability beyond when this funding ends, what we do when we partner with businesses, we actually have them pay into the service themselves. And so if we can get them going on this, then we can sustain that over the long haul. So this isn't just a one-off shot. It's more building it up along at the same time that these other aspects are being built as well. So it's kind of following along, climbing that ladder at the same time.
And equity-wise, Get There is available to any adult over the age of 18 who lives or works in the state. So it is very inclusive in that way.
Question?
On your local match, what would you anticipate?
Well, I mean, we have the match right now going along with the ODOT contract that we have, so we can use that. And then with the employer dues to get paid, like we could also use that as part of the match as well. So there's lots of options there.
Do you have a estimate of how much funding you would be seeking?
$250,000 over the 5 years.
Okay.
Which is flexible. But that's the first guess in order to basically double the capacity of what we're doing right now.
Thank you.
Was it the last presentation, Tyler?
What's that?
Was it the last presentation?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know it's
Peter?
Yeah, I was just curious for increasing, the use of the program. Were you going to try and get more out of existing program users or try to grow it into new users or some sort of combo of both?
That's a great question.
Sales training. I love it. We often, do you want me to talk or you want to talk, Brian?
Go for it. You got it.
Okay. We often talk about what's the best way to sell more of our product. And the going concern is getting more people at Deschutes County to register and log trips is an easier lift than going to Jefferson County and having them sign up brand new and get started. So augmenting, refer a friend program or, bring in a coworker promotion at an existing partner gets us more bang for our buck than, me knocking on doors and handing out flyers, which I will do also.
Yeah, and to add on to that, there's also some fairly large employers here in the Bend MPO area that we have not tapped. And so the market is still pretty large as far as who can and who is not participating in this already. So there's a lot of room to grow.
Yeah, so one thought I had, and I'm not saying this self-serving, I'm saying this because I think it's food that everybody knows. So I think for the last 9 to 12 months, like a lot of the people in this room that I pitched today, like Commute Options, Brian, Kim, Eric, now that he's on board with CET, Casey at OSU, me, Tyler, Andrea, some, and then we have had this new mobility working group that has met together. And I now it's a little bit self-pitching for the pitch that I brought today, but I hope that everybody knows me enough that I actually mean this sincere and not for that. One of the thoughts that comes behind that bigger proposal that we have is that, and Peter asked a question about how would we achieve carbon reduction. If we actually join together as a coalition, we achieve some of the same carbon reduction benefits that the individual project would have. So if commute option applies and shows a carbon reduction benefit, if they're part of our pitch as a program that we actually fund through that and do, we adopt that. The same as with CET, the same would be with Right Bend or other programs. The benefit that I see is that in itself initiates a new level of collaboration and collective approach that just simply doesn't exist yet. And I'm not meaning this to be mean towards any existing collective structure, not at all, rather the opposite. I think we all do a lot of really great work in the different committees that we have, but we're limited to how far we can go with that because we're so decentralized. And finding a way of bringing this together and showing that in a unified approach is kind of putting that stake in the ground and saying, from now we do this different. So maybe when we have a Park Place conversation, the conversation shouldn't be just about, do we do a sidewalk infill? It should be really about where do we put the mobility up so that we can provide the transit services there that we need. But we're not there yet because at the city, we don't have that policy, that code yet. Will we get there? Of course. But what if we can get there faster? And I think that's something that it's a really valid point. It can be, I admit, it's not easy to see that because we're all so used to make individual pitches for everything. I just feel I wanted to say that what if there's a better way if we're doing this all together and we can achieve all the different funds here as one application rather than three different ones. So, I rest my piece.
Would I be correct in saying, so what I am hearing from you, what I'm understanding is the Bend MPO could decide to submit all of, what we've heard so far. And the Bend MPO would recommend to ODOT, we think with this 1.1 million, we want $250,000 to go to CET. We want $250,000 to go to a new mobility mission. We want $250,000 to go over to commute options. That is one way we can approach this. What you are imagining is instead the entire 1.1 million would go toward mobility initiative. A portion of that, no more than half is what you guys are anticipating today, would go toward establishing this framework. And then once the framework is established, this new group will decide $250,000 to CET, a quarter. So, it's kind of, you guys are kind of giving me that yes and, we want to be, we just want to, and then with your framework, you won't just be hearing from the city of Bend, the county, and ODOT. You'll also be getting coordination from the school district and the library, all of our other agencies. Is that right?
Yeah.
Am I on track? Okay, thank you. Do we get here from ODOT also today? Is that?
No, I don't.
No?
Well, they didn't raise anything. I think if you recall, the way the funding is being divvied up for this program, ODOT gets about a third of it that's coming to the state to utilize for their own project.
Right.
The third will go to the be divvied up among the three large inflows, and the other third goes to everybody else. I mean, we have a carve out within that, but.
So that kind of gives me a question for Peter. Peter, doesn't ODOT have its own money from this program? Why is ODOT also trying to get our money from this program?
Well, I haven't worked for ODOT for 17 years, so
I'm sorry, Peter.
I can't, I'm not really sure why they're doing that, but
I'm sorry, Peter. Peter, what are you doing here? Who are you with?
Deschutes County.
Oh. And what is that in the background? Have you got an emoji with you? What's that yellow thing?
That's an Arizona State hat that, depending on which way I lean, suddenly pops up in view or goes away. It's really not hovering in midair.
It looks like a smiley. Yeah.
All right, never mind, Deschutes County. Rick, Mr. COVID, how are you feeling?
Yay.
Jump in there?
Yeah, I can talk for a little bit before I go into another coughing spasm.
Oh.
My understanding is this is federal funds, not state funds, and so we end up holding and managing the funds, but we're also a candidate to apply for the funds. And I thought it was interesting when you said, why is ODOT going after our funds? But if you look at your policy board, it includes an ODOT member for a reason.
No, sure, Rick. No, I don't mean I'm sorry if I said it like that.
I'm joking.
But is it true that there is a portion that is going directly, that is just over ODOT deciding what to do?
Yes.
That I'm not sure about. I don't know much about the program passed here at the regional level. I'm sorry.
It's okay. You don't need to apologize.
Well, Tyler might know more, but I imagine that 1/3 to ODOT is going to like a statewide vehicle electrification program or something that's going to tackle carbon in a totally different way than
We haven't heard anything now ODOT intends to use it, but just given they have their electrification, both for vehicles and they have a EV micro-mobility document, which is recently released. As well as other things that they're trying to do on the statewide system. There's a real push through the Oregon Transportation Plan update that's currently happening. Other things to really focus on multimodal improvements, particularly within the state's urban areas. And so I can see them utilizing some of the funds potentially to do that as well in terms of improving, the hard infrastructure in cities to make it so people actually bike and walk safely along and across some state highways. So they have quite a few options, I think, of how they could use it. I just haven't heard if they have what their intention is yet.
Did we know last time, we were not sure, somebody asked a question, I don't know who, if whatever project is submitted, can we get that money all up front, or is it annual distributed? So is it like,
Right?
Yeah, and that's something that ODOT, what we've heard is that ODOT staff has told us that they will make that determination after they see all the projects, what actually gets awarded funding. And then they'll step through a process working with those who receive funding to look at how does it make sense to actually program those funds over 5 years, actually 4 years now, those funds being available. So it's something I think if we step in and say, hey, we have three, if the board says they want to support all three projects and we're ready to go with all three, we can make the pitch and say, hey, we'd like to front load our funding, and be ready to go. And they would consider that, I think, as part of their process.
Okay, the reason I'm asking is because I think I've learned that was really helpful for me and probably for you too to get so much feedback today for our project pitch. And I think knowing that a little bit would be helpful. And we could say, like, if you would want to, like on our end, whatever we decide is a different story, we would include some of the projects that have a more immediate, tangible impact. We could actually write that like that.
Mm-hmm.
We can go back to the drawing board and say, we really want to reduce the planning aspect as much as we want, so that we can increase as much as we can to write shovel-ready projects like Get There or shelters or Right Bend or anything else. And we could be Bend pools. And we can be strategic, like really framing that more out, right? We know that the ODOT Innovative Mobility Fund is something that we have talked about.
Yes.
Potentially using $1 million in an application for car share program. And so I think a lot of these things didn't fit into the 5-minute presentation. That was probably 12 minutes. But I think there's a lot of that. And I think if we know that as an opportunity, we can frame this very well to actually build a solid case. And I lied, I didn't rest my case.
Any other comments or questions?
Then we are allowed to pass the money through City of Bend, for example, if they can cut a check for bus shelters or whatever, right? Doesn't have to remain within the project. Is that permissible use? It should be, yeah.
Especially if the pitch would be, if the project submission would include that, and would include a commitment from both organizations to work together on that, I think that would be part of the project pitch.
Just given that we're two different entities.
Yeah, that would be IGA, right, to figure that out.
Sure.
And that's something that I'm like, when Robin and I talked with David this morning, maybe important, that's what we discussed. That's like, if this is something that would be entertained, then we will do all the groundwork in the next week at the city end to ask the right people the right questions about what do we need to do to actually make that happen.
Chelsea?
Tyler, I think at our last meeting, we still weren't sure if they were going to do like one application round or several application rounds. Do we have any additional information about that yet?
No, we haven't heard anything.
Okay, thanks.
I'm just gonna pull up presentation real quickly again. So just, I think our goal is just, I just want to reiterate, I think we're really trying to we want to try and get this, and I think we're getting pretty close to narrowing down, we, even earlier today, I was kind of like, all right, we still have 15 projects under consideration. We're really down to 3 now, which I think is very encouraging.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you right there, but so intersection or traffic signal improvements, is that not our 3, 1, 2, 3 in this room?
No, the city, I think one of the things we talked about in our last meeting was, were there any projects that were on that list of people wanted to potentially drop from the list? And it sounds like the city has dropped the sidewalks and a couple of traffic signal type projects that were on that list.
To focus on this one.
Sure.
So our point for the TAC was to reduce it down to 2 or 3 to then bring to the policy board, correct?
Yes.
Then it seems like we've done that.
But does ODOT want to submit a separate application for signals?
To my knowledge, ODOT hasn't expressed, region staff haven't expressed any interest in applying for this, funds for the MPO. I think if they're going to they would utilize funds for some traffic signal improvements would come out of that statewide.
Okay,
And the chunk, the pot of money that they will be getting.
sure. Okay.
Rick, that's correct, isn't it?
If I can get my microphone on. Yes, we're not planning on applying for anything directly on this.
Oh, all right then. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so I think just one thing I just wanted to know, and I thought this was interesting. I listened to a little bit of the Oregon Transportation Commission meeting last week, and they had an update from their climate office staff, and they talked briefly about this program. And the 1 or 2 of the commissioners put the person on the spot and said, "Hey, what do you want to fund out of this?" And her response was, "Well, they really want to see projects that have rapid results." And she said, she specifically mentioned, electrification, transit, and bicycle infrastructure projects. But I don't think that's her kind of being put on the spot. And those are the things that popped into her head. But I just wanted to share that with the group, that that was the little bit of feedback that she provided to the OTC last week.
Yeah, and I can see that they want, immediate results, but I think what Toby's talking about is what long-term vision of this and using this to steer.
How do we shift modes? How do we get more people not driving alone?
And that's not, going to be happening tomorrow.
Right.
So.
Yeah, long-term strategy, I think we make that pitch, I think, is pretty important. You talk about, the long-term benefits. There will be maybe there'll be a little bit of a lag in terms of seeing immediate benefits go on long-term, we was seeking long-term potential.
And we could bridge that
Yeah, we could.
in a joint application where we're very strategic of saying, if you receive that, this is what we do immediately. And this is what we do immediately. So we could bridge that, and actually that could be a compelling case, that we do both immediate and long-term. And we could, through that, advocate for go-on money that's actually allocated $5 million that doesn't have a capital improvement plan yet for ITS programs and traffic signals and all those kind of things, right? And say like, hey, we really need to get on that. So how do we do that? And I think that was one of the reasons why we wanted the backbone to be in the city, because that's where we have the most influence on policy and code and updates that need to be happening.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Just being a new guy, red team things, because I don't know how ODOT's attitudes are. And
Yeah.
if they see something that's essentially 3 different projects, will they say, pick one, don't send us a Frankenstein? Or how's that typically approached?
Yeah, I don't think they would, I mean, honestly, I think they will look to see if we have a single application that has kind of 3 distinct pieces to it. I would think that they would support it. I think it's just a matter of them within of those 3 projects, what do we want to do in terms of divvying up the funding that is going to be available to us?
Yeah, and that could be our, the homework we do in the next couple weeks.
Anything that just shows collaboration.
It does,
Absolutely.
because we are all moving in the same coordinated direction.
Yep.
Quick system.
Rick?
Yeah, the only question it's been kind of nagging me here for a little bit. Looking at Tobias's presentation, this is an injection of funding, and it sets up a framework. But then every step after that is going to take another injection of funding, and there's no other funding identified in the future. I think it's laudable to try to bring groups of people together under one form of governance and move things forward. But how do we get long-term success? And listen to Eric's and Tobias's presentations, both of them, talked about a transit district, yet we don't have a transit district. A transit district takes a vote, and I don't see us being any closer to that. I mean, I don't have my finger on the pulse, but are we, the CET, planning to go out at some point to do that? Like I say, it sounds good. It sounds laudable, but it seems like it's going to take continuous funding, and we don't have that identified.
I think some of the legacy projects are the IGAs and the MOUs. The realignment of codes and standards that happen through the process, those will last forever. Those will move us into the future. So that's part of the legacy.
Yeah, and I'm like so thankful you asked that, because this is something I'm really excited about, because I know I really.
We keep hitting each other.
Okay, so the next biennial budget for the city of Bend will include, for the first time in the transportation mobility department, funding for the mobility division. And that's something that David and I have advocated for. So the structure is the transportation mobility department has the streets and operations division, the business division, the traffic engineering or transportation engineering division, and the mobility division. Is for the last couple of years, I don't want to use historical because the context is too much, but traditionally, we really only talked about parking ever as part of that, but it's really the upside down. It's really the mobility division that has parking underneath. And parking had 3 enterprise funds. Is self-funding, doesn't get any funding from the general fund at the city anymore, has to make the money themselves, and it's doing very well. So we felt now is the time to create a mobility division org that can actually include funding for new mobility programs like bike share, expansion of our neighborhood mobility program, Ride Bend, other programs, and we're willing to expand them more and really advocating for that. So while I can tell you where that funding will come from in 3 to 4 years, I am sure, very sure, and very strongly will lean myself out of the window that where we're heading right now, with the focus that the Transportation and Mobility Department has on increasing new mobility options, paving the way, so to speak, unintended, for getting better in how we are building and where we're moving, and having a council that's super devoted to making those changes part of our code. I think, yes, is it premature to know what's in the next biennial, like for 25, 26? I don't know that, but I know that for 24, 25, we are ready to budget for programs like this. And once we usually are increasing that. And knowing that the parking fund is something that's very healthy, that one could make the case that parking is also transportation and part of the, but want to be careful because, Councilor Kimberly, and I don't want to put you in a position, but from my perspective as being the parking services division manager, we have always talked about, is there a way of using a percentage of parking revenues now that we don't have parking minimums anymore to advance alternative transportation programs, which would be a smart thing to do. Great model for that, Rick. You probably know. If you look at Stanford, what they have done a couple of years ago, it's a brilliant example for how we can do that. So I think I completely hear your concern, but I'm super excited that that's something that we are actually discussing and how we're moving forward.
I was gonna just
ask you, I mean, in terms of, thinking from your own perspective as well as trying to channel the energy of the full board, do you think are there any questions or issues that?
Do we need a new framework, or do we need to restructure the Bend MPO and add more membership spots on the MPO? What if the MPO included the school district and CET? Would it then be the MPO that is, doing exactly what it is that what I hear you guys saying? And I 1000% agree, especially when it comes to the school district, that we need to be coordinating. And then with parks also, but I don't know how we could have a parks member on MPO, but maybe we could.
It could be a working group of the NPO.
Yeah, that's kind of my question. Do we need a new framework? Go ahead.
I mean, as far as working groups, there are all those members on our PAC, but
Yeah.
not on the board.
Yeah.
I'll speak to just like one element of that. Toby mentioned this work group that we've had for, I think we met 3 or 4 times. Many of us in the room, I think, Derek from CET before Eric came on board, but we had these conversations and we all said, what's the biggest priority we should be focusing on? And we kind of went around in circles. And I think it's not that we were fighting with each other about what the priorities should be. It was kind of like, we're not sure what the priorities should be. I mean, there was a lot of discussion of an integrated payment platform for transit and bike share and whatever service comes next. That could drive ridership. More people might be willing to use it if there was a great one source payment platform. And then talk about equity. Oh, you could layer an equity thing onto that payment platform. Oh, great opportunity. Who's going to do that? Who wants to move that forward? I don't think anyone can single-handedly, unless someone like CET could hire a position to do that. But that's just kind of where we landed with a lot of those discussions. Is we all see great opportunity, we all get excited, and then, but who's going to do it?
Who's going to do it?
Yeah, I just not to rain on anything, but I do still see that as a catch here is that we're obligating staff hours to this project and we're obligating county staff and CET staff to this. And
so
that's a high dependency, right?
Oh, completely. And I think that's the whole point. And so I think I hear what you're saying 100%. I also think that is a case that could be made of saying that work group, the steering group, the leadership of the New Mobility Initiative could grow out of the MPO, no question. The backbone can still be at the City of Bend to provide the staff resources, all that. I think the commitment is exactly that, Eric. for the new mobility initiative to work as a collective impact model, every participating organization makes a commitment of sorts of saying, yes, we are a part of that. And we are devoting a staff member this many hours to that. That's a commitment. It's not like a hard cash commitment, but it's that. And that's needed, right? It's kind of like with your kids. You give and take, you hold them responsible a little bit, and they're giving you something, and then you measure it.
So I guess the question then is, would it be better under that collaborative model, under the MPO, or housed under the city of Bend than directing other partner governments? Does that create friction, that structure being housed under the city of Bend?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think that would be I think it's interesting when we submitted the smart grant application, that was a question that was brought up by the city. Is it like, should we own that? Should we do that? And I think, see, where I'm a little bit stubborn is too hard of a word, but for the lack of better words, where I'm a little bit stubborn and I think the city should take the leadership is because as somebody who's new to the community, it feels that sometimes the city didn't want to take the leadership in the past. They wanted to be a little bit hands off. And because of that, like whatever, parking, great example, right? We didn't want to have parking and enforcement in-house because it's super convenient to say, well, it's not us issuing the ticket, it's down in parking. Where it's really us, they're just doing it on our behalf. And it's a little bit weird, right? But so I think it's okay to take the ownership. And so I think, I'm not sure I have the answer. I think either way can work. So could it be at COIC, but I think that's where the group that works together collectively should decide that. What's the cons? What's the benefit if it runs with the city? Direct source to the code, the policy work that needs to be done. Much easier to get there as if it's coming from the outside, right? So that's an advantage, I think. But I wouldn't say that that's not in stone. I think the whole part of it being collective is it needs to be decided as a group. The framework is that guiding document that comes out of that, that then says, this is what we want to focus on. Whatever we do, it needs to hit this. So we know we're advancing these plans and we have spent $1 million onto development.
Peter, your hand.
Yeah, thank you.
So just to move us to what we were trying to get to, I propose you fully fund Cascade East Transit proposal, you fully fund commute options, and then let Tobias's group identify their $400,000 worth of projects. I'll be honest, I'm really not interested in another cast of an agency under a new hat. We already coordinate through the Bend MPO. That's your regional governance. I don't think we need another mobility initiative group when it's the same cast of characters. We're just going to wear our mobility initiative hats instead of our Deschutes County or Bend MPO hats. I mean, we've already accomplished all that with TAC meetings and policy board presentations.
I kind of agree with you, Peter, except that we're missing the school district and
they're on the TAC.
What's that?
They're on the
TAC. No,
TAC.
you're right. Yeah, no, fair point. That's right, Peter. Thank you for saying that again. Yeah, they are there. Yeah.
Does anybody else have feedback? I mean, similar to Peter in terms of, thoughts about the proposals that were presented today. I was trying to figure out how I'm going to package this together for the full board to consider.
Yeah.
And Robin, I think you had mentioned kind of potentially doing a little, homework over the next couple of weeks in terms of thinking about how these three distinct pieces would fit into a single application.
Yeah, well, and just what moves the needle faster, quicker, getting ride bend, getting van pools, getting some more shuttle services versus getting the amenitized aspects of a transit stop. I think it's the shorter headways. I think it's the quicker routes. Gets more riders collectively as opposed to, okay, it's an amenitized stop. I think we need that, absolutely. But I don't know about the timing of it. I think I'd rather get more riders first and then start serving. And through opportunity projects like, CET and the city are collaborating on 27th Street to get in a new hub in front of the high school and right by the church. And so we're pouring the foundation. It's a deeper foundation. It's got the rebar in it so that we can put the fancier shelter on it. And so we're getting those. And I think we'll just get those eventually getting more riders to CET is absolutely critical.
Yeah,
So-
and just to clarify, the big catch there on like headways is of course drivers.
Yeah.
We are gonna be coming back to 30 minutes on most Bend routes in the next month or two. But that's why we're focusing on infrastructure, is because we've got the money ready for salaries.
Yeah.
We just don't have people to pay. So that's why we're focusing on infrastructure in the meantime.
Well, and I really, that survey you did, the stops, did they pull just as high as headways? It seems that it really surprised me, but I completely agree. Is that, for that person who put out their own chair, or is it actually going to attract new riders? That's where it obviously, does anybody know? And that's the trickiness of those improvements, even though that absolutely was what people asked for.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Just a quick time checks. We're past
Yeah.
our time. So Toby, you have some closing?
yeah, I think that what Peter said has merit. I just think that I would push directly at him, I can't see him right now, a little bit to say like maybe review what we're actually proposing a little bit more, because I think that the collective part of it is what's important, not whether we're creating a new steering committee outside the MPO or outside the city. The collective part is important.
Right.
And quite frankly, maybe read about that a little bit more. So I think that could that be done in the MPO? Sure. I think it's a collectiveness behind it that is different and it makes a difference. And that I think we shouldn't ignore. That's all I want to say. And I think everybody in the room here, like including Peter and Eric, kind of acknowledged that and said like, oh, we would be interested in working with that. So I think just let's look at that as being something important, because it can make a huge difference.
So I think, one of the things we kind of gelled around these three ideas and how it gets packaged, that's to be determined over the next 2-3 weeks.
Mhm.
But I think we haven't heard from ODOT yet in terms of when they're going to want our feedback, but if the application period for these projects or these funds closes at the end of May. So I suspect they'll be wanting feedback from the MPO board either in May or June, they're anticipating doing their review process over the course of the whole summer. Depending on how many projects, applications they receive. So having a solid plan on how we're going to move forward by the end of April would be great for us to be able to take that to our board. That's doable from everybody here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot.
It's exciting stuff.
It is exciting, yes. And certainly for me, the answer is all of the above. I want it all. I want everything we've talked about and more. And I know that's absolutely everybody here. There's nobody, thinking, no, we don't want commute options to get anything. That is not the case. All the way down to traffic signals. I think we all agree. Even those traffic signals will help the buses. So, yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
All right. Thank you.
It's good work. Now even the traffic signals work together to support.
That's what I came away with from the last time. Was, hold on, CEP is saying they want signal improvements for the buses, but we don't put two